It brings me no pleasure to compare what Israel's doing to what the Nazis did. But how can we not? Because you have things like ghettos, you have things like starvation, you have things like concentration camps, you have things like the planned, systematic extermination of people. Now, a lot of people talk about the banality of evil. There was a real cold detachment, industrialized murder of Jews and others during the Holocaust. What's so disturbing about what Israel is doing and the IDF is doing is that they are doing it with glee. And unlike the Nazis, they're not hiding it. And we know this because they document this. They document not just the war crimes, but they document their glee. You even have Israeli soldiers themselves comparing themselves to Nazis. One of them said, "I felt like a Nazi. It looked exactly like we were the Nazis and they were the Jews." They, of course, being Palestinians. Another soldier said it is justified and, in fact, essential to learn from every possible source, even, however shocking it may sound, how the German army fought in the Warsaw Ghetto. So there we have Israeli soldiers literally learning from Nazi tactics and comparing themselves explicitly to the Nazis, and the Palestinians to the Jews. Ironically, according to the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism, it is anti-Semitic to, quote, draw comparisons between contemporary Israeli policies to that of the Nazis. So I guess those soldiers are themselves anti-Semitic, according to this definition. Another point of comparison, although it's actually a point of departure, is the relationship between the genocide and public opinion. Now, the Nazis tried as best they could to hide what they were doing. And in fact, the biggest concentration camps that they built were outside of Germany. And they didn't do them in public places. And even though it was illegal to resist the Nazis, you did have some resistance from people who were fighting against what the Nazis were doing within Germany. In Israel, however, everyone knows what's happening. It's documented by legacy media, it's documented by social media, and yet the vast majority of Israelis think that the government is using either an appropriate amount of force or not enough force against the Palestinians. You even have young people dancing to genocide. Another thing that Israeli society seems to be A-okay with is the rape of Palestinians. Now, Western media spread a narrative of mass rape used as a weapon by Hamas. Every single so-called witness to rape on October 7th has backtracked. No media, however, has corrected this. But what has the Western media totally ignored, which, ironically enough, the Israeli media has covered? The rape of Palestinians. There's literal video footage of Israeli soldiers who pick up a Palestinian, raise their shields to hide what they're doing, but are obviously gang raping him. So what happened next? There were protests. Protests against the rape? No. There were protests that have been dubbed right to rape protests. You have people, including members of government, you have soldiers, you have civilians, who protested the punishment of rapists. That's what they were upset about. It really is insane when you think about it. Literally, the entire Western media apparatus devoted itself to talking about rapes for which there is no evidence, and devoted itself to remaining silent about rapes which were documented by Israeli media. One Israeli journalist in a Times of Israel blog post said, "Lebensraum needed for Israel's exploding population." And if that sounds familiar, it may be because Hitler used the word Lebensraum in Mein Kampf to describe what was needed to move the German population eastward. Likewise, Israel is expanding, not just in Palestine, the West Bank, Gaza, but also Syria and Lebanon. And there are calls from up on high, from Israeli officials, for creating a greater Israel. This plan for Greater Israel is so frightening that even Moshe Yalon, a former IDF commander, said,
על עליונות יהודית, מיין קאמפ במהופך. שרותיי סומרות שאני אומר את זה.
Here are some other comparisons that one cannot help but draw between the Israeli government and the Nazi government. Hitler in 1939, speaking to the German parliament, said, "If the world of international financial Jewry, both in and outside of Europe, should succeed in plunging the nations into another world war, the result will be the extermination of the Jewish race in Europe." In 2016, during an interview Former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said, quote, "If they, the people of Gaza, engage in a new war on Israel, it will be the final war for them because we will completely destroy them." The following is a quote from Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. "We had the moral right, we had the duty to our people to destroy this people which wanted to destroy us." Now listen to this from Ezra Yakin, a veteran from the Deir Yassin massacre, one of the worst massacres of the Nakba, who on October 13th, 2023, talked to Israeli soldiers about the need to go into battle.
תעלו והצליחו, תכסחו אותם כמה שיותר, שלא להשאיר מהם זכר, שלא הם, לא אמא שלהם, לא הילדה שלהם, לא התינוקות שלהם, אסור להם לחיות האלה. נקבל עוד טילים מהחיזבאללה ויקומו כל הערבים בארץ נגדנו, ואז לא תהיה ברירה, מי יש לו נשק יירה בהם. אתה יש לך שכן ערבי, אתה לא תחכה שהוא יבוא אליך הביתה. תיכנס אליו הביתה ותירה בו.
Some of the things that were said and written by early founders of Zionism sounded like they could have been said and written by Nazis. We can see this clearly with Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism. Herzl blamed Jews for creating anti-Semitism. He said that anti-Semitism was caused by, quote, "our excessive production of mediocre intellects. In some point in our history, some inferior human material got into our unfortunate people and blended with it." He also said, "We want to let respectable anti-Semites participate in our project being the founding of Israel." He also said, "The anti-Semites will become our most dependable friends. The anti-Semitic countries are allies." Zvi Jabotinsky, the father of revisionist or right-wing Zionism, said, "The Jews are very nasty people, and their neighbors hate them, and they are right." Our starting point is to take the typical Yid of today and to imagine his diametrical opposite. Because the Yid is ugly, sickly, and lacks decorum, we shall endow the ideal image of the Hebrew with masculine beauty. He was also open about the colonial nature of Zionism. "We shall try to spirit the penniless population, Palestinians, across the border by procuring employment for it in the transit countries, while denying it employment in our country. But the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly." Uri Zvi Greenberg, an Israeli poet, journalist, and politician, said, "Those loathsome Jews are vomited out by any healthy collective and states, not because they are Jews, but because of their Jewish repulsiveness." David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, said, "Jews, quote, have no roots. They are rootless cosmopolitans. There can be nothing worse than that. They are sterile Jewish masses living parasitically off of the body of an alien economic body." Lest you think that Israel was founded to save the Jews, listen to this fascinating quote by Ben-Gurion. "If I knew that it was possible to save all the children of Germany by transporting them to England and only half by transferring them to the land of Israel, I would choose the latter." So there you have famous Zionists and Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, saying he was willing to let hundreds of thousands of Jewish children die for a national project. Creating a Jewish majority where there was none was obviously going to lead to, at the very least, ethnic cleansing. And when there was resistance, it would lead to massacres and ultimately genocides. And that's what we're seeing today. An Israeli protester said in June 2025,
"I want to apologize to the world to be a Jew and Israeli in a country that behaves like Germany, the Nazis at 1940. Israel is now a complete copy of what happened in Germany."
I never felt comfortable making comparisons between Nazi Germany and contemporary Israel. But today I find myself unable to remain silent about the similarities. You can't help but comparing the emaciated skeletal bodies of Palestinians and Palestinian children to the emaciated and skeletal bodies of Jewish people during the Nazi Holocaust. And when you see videos of people in concentration camps during the Holocaust clamoring for food, how can you not think of the Palestinians trying to get food from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which lures them by offering them food only to kettle them or shoot them? I myself lost family members during the Holocaust, and I've spent the last year and a half interviewing Holocaust survivors who are themselves speaking out against the genocide Israel is currently perpetuating. How can we be bystanders to a genocide when genocide exterminated so many of our people? Never again doesn't just require us not to commit genocide, it requires us not to be silent. We must speak out. We cannot be silent bystanders. Never again is now. You never hear opinions like these in the mainstream media or on legacy media. Much of legacy media serves as a stenographer for Israel. That's why independent media is so important. So please support places like Double Down News and The Katie Halper Show on Patreon.